Do you have the gift of gab and like talking about interesting topics? Are you often called opinionated by your friends and family? Then come to Anchor where you can be all of the above and get paid for it. Along with being one of the easiest systems to create contact with, Anchor supplies everything you need and can be used from your smartphone or computer. They even distribute your content for you so that you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Just download the Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. And you are listening to 31 Days. Hello, Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib. And you are listening to 31 Days of Global Feminism. So, as I said yesterday in my live, in keeping with the theme, there is going to be some overlap. So you're going to hear, when I do the notables, you're going to hear people that you're like, well, wouldn't they be better as part of Black History Month? Well, maybe, but they also are more likely to have a global view. So instead of starting off with a notable for my first podcast for March, I'm going to start off with the topic of global feminism, and I'm going to explain. So all the source material is coming from Wikipedia, and I'm going to give you information about what it means to be global, what global feminism means, and why it is so important. I'm also going to do another post on the definition of feminism and, the history, which I did one not too long ago, but I'm also going to go into feminism's effect on humanity, because many times feminism gets blamed for things that feminism didn't cause that. Many of the conditions that people are saying, like romantic relationships in some cultures were busted before. If anything, feminism probably improved some things rather than harm some things. But as I promised, I'm not going to just do a bunch of notables and talk about a bunch of important women. I am going to mention women, both historic notables, but also current notables, people that are history makers right here in this current atmosphere. So I'm going to go ahead and go into that right now. So the topic for today is global feminism. So what is global feminism? So global feminism is a feminist theory that is closely aligned with post-colonial theory. So let's go into what is post-colonialism. Post-colonialism is the critical academic study of the cultural, political, and economic legacy of colonialism and imperialism, focusing on the impact of human control and exploitation of colonized people and their lands. More specific, it is a critical theory analysis of the history, culture, literature, and discourse of usually European imperial power. Post-colonialism encompasses a wide variety of approaches, and their theoreticists may not always agree on a common set of definitions. On a simple level, though, anthropological study, it may seek to build a better understanding of colonial life based on the assumption that the colonial rulers are unreliable narrators from the point of view of the colonized people. So back to the topic of global feminism. Now that we know what post-colonial really actually means, it concerns itself primarily with the forward movement of women's rights on a global scale. Using historical lenses from the legacy of colonialism, global feminists adopt global causes and start movements which seek to dismantle what they argue are the current predominant structures of global patriarchy. Global feminism is also known as world feminism or international feminism. So two historical examples global feminists might use to expose patriarchal structures at work in colonialized groups or societies are medieval Spain, late 11th to 13th centuries, and 19th century Cuba. The former example concerns women of the Mudejar communities of Islamic Spain and the strict sexual codes through which their social activity was regulated. Mudejar women could be sold into slavery as a result of sexual activity with a Christian man. This was to escape the deemed punishment because their simultaneous roles as upholding one's family honor and one of conjured status and gender. Mudejar women suffered double jeopardy in their sexual contact with Christians in Spain. 19th century Cuba can be looked at as an example of colonialism and neo-colonialism working together in a slave-based society to affect women's lives under patriarchy, where Cuba remained a Spanish colony. And to know any of the history on that, you would have to know about the Spanish settlers and basically European colonization globally. While enduring a neo-colonialist relationship with the United States, Havana, a city known for its absence of the female form, had all of the major cities in the West the most strict and social restrictions on the female portion of its population. Upper class Cuban women were a constant visual reminder of the separation between elite white society and the people of color that they ruled. Yeah, definitely gonna post this. So, transnational mothering. Forced commitment to double shifts, struggle for individual autonomy, and blurring the private and public sector of labor are all additional concerns to the primary issue for migrant women, which is the right to motherhood. The phenomena of motherhood in a transnational and contemporary time creates structural constraints for migrant women. Abusive employers and intimate violence is not the only problem these women have to face, but there are structural issues regarding the right to motherhood in this transnational era. Women immigrants leave their chance overseas at an idealized motherhood of watching their children grow up while performing their gender role, and deport to the breadwinner. The restructuring of care from the effects of globalism and neoliberalism institutionalizes these women. Globalization is constantly changing, and as a result, and in this current thing, yeah, I'm with the Ukraine. Like, I'm not supporting Russia in the least. But as you can see with current events, globalization changes constantly, and as a result, it is supporting the phenomena of women in the global South migrating to developed countries to serve domestic laborers. The role of transnational mothering within a neoliberal specter affects the exploitation of women through depriving them of their citizen rights by extracting the benefits of immigrants' labor while minimizing or eliminating any obligations, whether social or fiscal, to the society or state. Migrant women of third world countries are not drawn from their countries to the advancing economy of the first world. Rather, they're drawn from their economies that have been disrupted and distorted by Western colonial insertions, leaving many to be torn free of their roots and recruited to countries to fill its non-permanent labor needs, preventing competition with native workers and fulfilling the complementary void. Transnational mothering is viewed as an accommodation for both classes. Motherhood, along with reproductive freedom and marriage, is the fundamental right of women, but is prohibited by nations that justify foreign domestic services, such as much as view immigrant women as a threat to its nationalism. Nations create a process of racial formation. So racial formation, oh good Lord. So racial formation theory is an analytic tool in sociology developed by Michael Almy and Howard Wynant, which is used to look at race as a socially constructed identity, where the content and importance of racial categories are determined by social, economic, and political forces. Unlike other traditional race theories, in Almy and Wynant's view, racial meanings pervade U.S. society, extending from the shaping of individual racial identities to the structuring of collective political action on the terrain of the state. That's interesting. Let me get back down here. So nations create a process of racial formation through which women of different national and racial identities experience discrepant integration within a society, ultimately contributing to hierarchies of citizenship. In relation to social Darwinism, natives believe that third world migrants just can't make it and fear degeneration. Thus, nations try to weed out those who do not fit the upper or middle class society in ways such as sterilization. You know, one example is black women being identified as devious, immoral, domineering, sexually promiscuous, and bad mothers, resulting in their reproductive rights being threatened by regulation. And it does happen. So we learned in a sociology class that that certain things that we deem as racial are actually a social construct. And I agree, because we are all of the human race, even if we come from different social structures, we are different ethnicities. Okay, we are different ethnicities, but we are all one human race. So culturally, there are differences based on culture. There are differences, and there are a lot of subcultures. So we talked about this based on people who tell, like say in the black community, you have black people who tell other black people that they are acting white. And then you have to ask them to, define what is acting white. Okay, and what they're meaning is, in their viewpoint, you are exhibiting behaviors that they associate with being white, but there are black people who do those things too. or a white person who is accused of acting black, and you find that there are white people who do the same things that those people are doing, okay, but you associate, you're basically racializing behavior. I remember watching a episode of one of the reality shows. I'm not going to say the name, and one of the ladies on the show admitted that her mother used to call her out her name. She used to call her the B word, and so I was like, and so one of the other characters was like, well, black mothers are different. And I'm like, that is not being a black mother. I'm like, that is verbal abuse. So when they talk about it being a social construct, because that isn't really acting black. There are white mothers who call their daughters out their name too, but that's not being a black mother. That's an example of verbal abuse. And it's not really coupled with love. What you're doing is, handing down a form of behavior that was handed down to you. So one of the things, like, there are plenty of sexually promiscuous, domineering, devious, and immoral white women, but nobody's stopping them from procreating. No one's sterilizing them, and I read the story of, I believe it was Ida B. Wells Barnett, who I believe was a victim of, there are several historical figures who were victims of actual sterilization, regulating your ability to have children. And so there has been a lot of controversy based on that. So let me see here. So if you want to look at, I'm going to look at feminism next, because that was, the end of that. Let me see here. Okay, and there's transnational feminism. What is this one? Revolutionary. So if you want to look even further, I'm going to click on feminism and read the definition of feminism. But there's also two other topics if you want to investigate global feminism a little bit further. One is Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan. This is a women's organization based in Kabul, Afghanistan, that promotes women's rights and secular democracy. It was founded in 1977 by Mina Keshwar Kamal, a Afghan student activist who was assassinated, oh my God, in February 1987 for her political activities. The group, which supports nonviolent strategies, had its initial office in Kabul, Afghanistan, and then moved to Pakistan in the early 1980s. So if you want to, now their aim is to involve women of Afghanistan in both political and social activities aimed at acquiring human rights for women. So and continuing the struggle against the government of Afghanistan based on democratic and secular, not fundamentalist principles, which women can participate fully. Okay, so if you want to read even more, you can type in RAWA, and you can go into Wikipedia. That's where this information is. And so another one is, I may read, so this is transnational feminism. Transnational feminism refers to both a contemporary feminist paradigm and the corresponding activist movement. Both the theories and activist practices are concerned with how globalization and capitalism affect people across nations, races, genders, and sexualities. This movement asked to critique the ideologies of traditional white, classist, Western models of feminist practices from an intersectional approach. And I'm going to revisit intersectionality this month as well. And how these connect with labor, theoretically applications, and analytical practice on a geopolitical scale. The term transnational is a reactionary term, and the rejection of terms like international and global. Transnational, I know, seems like as soon as you get a hold to a term, somebody comes, well, the better name for that is. And global. Transnational feminists believe that the term international puts more emphasis on national states as distinct entities, and that global speaks to liberal feminism theories on global sisterhood that ignore third world. Oh, how dare you say that we're ignoring that we ignore third world women and women of color's perspective on gender inequality and other problems globalization inherently brings. So if you want to know more on this topic, I may have to dig a little bit more into this myself, so I'm going to go ahead and make it another topic. So let me go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and make this another topic for this month. So this is going to be one of my 31 Days of Feminism, of Global Feminism topics. I know, it seems like every time you get involved in something. And I'm going to go ahead. Okay. So I'm going to go back over here. And let me get into, oh gosh, there are so, honey, I got so many topics that I will be covering. So, post-colonial, this thing is like opening up a box of anything. And it's like the more, okay, feminism of the 99%. Ooh. Have you ever, like in your life, been researching something? And I'm here to tell you now, if you're a person who likes to run the rabbit trail and likes to sit and just, if you can sit and spend hours perusing through something, I'm here to tell you that Wikipedia is your page. I promise you. If you are one of those people, like when I was a kid, this is going to sound funny to some people. I'm gonna tell on myself. I'm expose myself. I am a lifelong learner. I love to study stuff, and I love to research. And it isn't to be a know-it-all. You just like, number one, it makes you an interesting person because you have many different things to talk about. Especially when I did hair and was, that the type of customer service that comes with doing hair. It's good to be well read. One of the things that I learned from my cosmetology instructors was you want to be a well-read person because you are not just selling them on what you do to their head. You're also selling them on you. Because they can get somebody that does hair as well as you do and have if you have a boring personality, but the next person can do what you do and they have a good personality, they're entertaining to be around, guess who they're going to go to? And, it makes you an interesting person when it comes to the dating world, because, it's nice now. You don't want to just pour out everything like right there in the same setting, but you want to be able to be engaging is the word I'm looking for. And I'm not just talking about women. I'm talking about men too. Because I'm here to tell you now, last night I was putting together my playlist for next week's music eclectic music geek podcast. And it's going to be based on global feminism. If I can find more women from other lands to put in there, there's a couple people that already have global feminist playlists made up. So I, stole a few artists and stole a few songs from prior playlists. But as I began to put that thing together, all of the songs that I could think of and artists that I felt like fit that trope. People like Sister Soldier, people like Salt and Pepper, people like Queen Latifah with her bad self. Different other people who have had songs that still resonate with me and still minister to me on days when I feel like I'm about to take some of these men and cut their dick off if they don't stop with the foolishness, right? Because we just gonna be honest. When you start to really go into the ways that we as women get violated, the ways that our rights are messed with on a regular basis, once that light bulb goes off, and then you can't go back around people that you can't even go back around it's like getting saved, right? It's like getting saved and then have to go back around your family members and listen to them cuss and listen to them cuss and listen to them carry on and do the stuff that you used to do that you don't do no more. It's hard. It's very hard. It's very hard. Once you are enlightened or going away to college and you done opened up your brain and just had all these life-changing experiences, you're expanding your horizons, then you got to come back around Pookie and Ray Ray, or the white equivalent to Pookie and Ray Ray. Okay. Billy Bob and Sally Sue or whoever, or whoever, you just got to come back around the people that haven't been exposed to what you've been exposed to. It's just like, you just learn, and then you try to enlighten the people around you, and it's hard. It's hard. Imitating Wendy Raquel Robinson's character on The Game, Tanya Mack, it's hard. Okay? It's hard. It's very hard. It's hard. It's hard trying to, go back and especially if you had positive changes, you don't want to change back to that person. So it's not easy. It's really not easy. That's one of the reasons why the Word of God says that a person that is going to be in church leadership cannot be a new convert. Because you have to be strong enough that when people come around and try to drag you back, and I've had that experience, I'm here to tell you now. When people try to drag you back to the club, I don't do the club no more. You seen my new stomping grounds. Okay, I don't do that no more. Girl, I remember this one scene in Think Like a Man that described me and some of the people I used to hang around with. So the Megan Good character, when Lala said to her, "Are you really gonna be able to go 90 days without any?" And now I was not so bad that I had to deal with some annoying little dude like the Chris Brown character coming around looking at me going, because that would be embarrassing. Some little dweeb like that looking at you going, "What is your name again?" I'm like, no, you would never feel what I know. You would never know what this coochie feel like and don't know my first and last name. I ain't that woman. Okay. If anything, it would be the reverse. I'd be walking around going, God, I'm so embarrassed. I don't know his name. Like, yeah, it has never gotten, I have never gotten that intimate that fast. I don't, if that's your history, do not feel like you're being judged, because you're not. Because I'm trying to set a stage for those of us that are part of the party crowd, those of us that are going into marriage and your husband is not the first man to see you naked. You just, you had fun. And so having to change your behavior and everything. And I remember that because I had friends that were like, girl, are you gonna really be able to stay out the club? Well, girl, what are you doing? Like, girl, like, you really ain't been with a man in 26 years? Like, honey, I remember we were sitting in a Sunday school class one time, and when the that particular pastor's wife, I think, brought her sister or somebody in, and girl was good and saved, and I hadn't even hit the 10-year mark at that time. And old girl said how long it had been, and my friend that was sitting in the class with us looked at her and said, well, bless your heart. So you have ever heard any of that stuff, girl, you have changed. You like that old spiritual song, I know I have changed. So let me go into feminism. So now we're going into just good old-fashioned regular feminism. No black feminism, no white feminism, no Christian feminism, no trans, no none of that. Just regular garden variety, just regular good old feminism, the original word. So we're going to go into the original movement to kind of get one of the there's this online magazine that I like to read and revisit, and it is called Everyday Feminism. And they always are having really, really good, one of the things that I like to think that I had a hand in, myself and others, is getting white and black feminists and feminist women who believe in the fight for not just women's rights, but women's human rights. Okay? Some of us aren't even getting the respect we deserve as just human beings, much less, dealing with issues that pertain to us as women. Right. Okay? Right. Our human rights aren't even being considered. There was a young man on American Idol this week that came in with an original song, and it addressed police brutality, but it also addressed both the first time I heard somebody talk about police brutality and mentioned black women, included black women in on the discussion. Bless my heart. Bless my heart. Because typically we're talking about black men and black women. It's like, when it's a black man, oh, he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to kill him. He didn't have to do this. And then when a black woman gets mentioned, well, she'd have been a little more cooperative. You know how some of y'all are with your mouths and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh, dude, wait a minute. Like a minute ago, if she'd have had a penis, you would have, oh, they didn't have to kill her. Like, at what point do we start becoming disposable? No. This thing we in this thing together, okay? Anyway, so so right now I'm gonna go ahead and, like I said, all information right now is courtesy of Wikipedia. However, you are free to, if you look at a thorough Wikipedia breakdown, you will see those little numbers. Those little numbers are where where whoever wrote it cited sources. So you are free. What I used to do when I was in school is I would look certain things up on Wikipedia, and then I would look at the sources and go to the sources, and that source all of a sudden would become my source. I know. So, right now that I've sit over here and went on my little Easter egg hunt, let me come back. So now I'm gonna talk. We're gonna talk about feminism. I wanted to do global feminism first because that's what I'm celebrating on my media ministry is global feminism. So 31 days of global feminism, and I'm not changing it to nothing else until I look at the whole thing with transnational, because I'm sick and tired of attaching to something and then having somebody go, well, unlike. I'm like, oh, and so then I had to put up a cross like the dude behind Dracula. Look, get back, demon. Okay. So, feminism is a range of social political movements and ideologies that aim to define and establish the political, economic, personal, and social equality of the sexes. Now, gender equality, also known as sexual equality or equality of the sexes, is the state of equal ease of access to resources and opportunities regardless of gender, including economic participation and decision making, and the state of valuing different behaviors and aspirations, needs, equalities regardless of gender. Gender equality is the goal, while gender neutrality and gender equity are practices and ways of thinking that help in achieving the goal. Gender parity, which is used to measure gender balance in a given situation, can aid in achieving gender equality, but is not the goal in and of itself. So gender parity is a statistical measure used to describe ratios between men and women or boys and girls in a given population. Gender parity may refer to the proportionate representation of men and women in a given group, also referred to as sex ratio, or it may mean the ratio between any quantifiable indicator amongst men against the same indicator amongst women. Okay. So let's go on back here to feminism. So feminism incorporates the position that societies prioritize the male point of view and that women are treated unjustly within these societies. Efforts to change that include fighting against gender stereotypes and establishing educational, professional, and interpersonal opportunities and outcomes for women that are equal to those of men. Feminist movements have campaigned and continue to campaign for women's rights, including the right to vote, hold public office, work, earn equal pay, own property, receive education, enter contracts, have equal rights with marriage and maternity leave. Feminists have also worked to ensure access to contraception, legal abortions, and social integration, and to protect women and girls from rape, sexual harassment, and domestic violence. Changes in female dress standards and acceptable physical activities for females have often been seen as part of feminist movements. Some scholars consider feminist campaigns to be a main force behind major historical societal changes for women's rights, but particularly in the West. So the West is considered, like, we are considered to be the West. The Americas, which would be North, Central, and South America, as well as Canada and the Alaskan regions and all of that. So we are considered to be the West. And so in the West, where they are near universally credited with achieving women's suffrage, which is the right for women to vote, gender neutral marriage, reproductive rights for women, including access to contraceptions and abortions, the right to enter into contracts and own property. Through feminist advocacy, although feminist advocacy has mainly been focused on women's rights, some feminists argue for the inclusion of men's liberation within its aims because they believe that men are also harmed by traditional gender roles. On some level, yes. Feminist theory, which emerged from feminist movements, aims to understand the nature of gender inequality by examining women's social roles and lived experience. Feminist theories have developed, feminist theorists have developed theories in a variety of disciplines in order to respond to issues concerning gender. Numerous feminist movements and ideologies have developed over the years and represent different viewpoints and aims. Traditionally, since the 19th century, first wave liberal feminism sought political and equality through reforms in a liberal democratic framework and was contrasted with labor-based proletarian women's movements that over time developed into social and Marxist feminism based on class struggle theory. Since the 1960s, both of those traditions are also contrasted with radical feminism that arose from the radical wing of second wave feminism. So second wave feminism, if I were going to take up a symbol of second wave feminism, if I could say a visual symbol, the picture of Gloria Steinem and Gabrielle Sedovey's aunt, who I talked about the first time I started doing 28 or 29 Days of Black Feminism, standing beside each other with the Black Power salute or Femme Power salute, since we're talking about a black and a white woman, standing beside each other in that iconic pose. Basically a symbol of sisterhood that says, no matter what race or color, we are yet all united because we are female. So we're united through our your burden is mine. Your burden is mine. I'm talking about the ideal. I'm not talking about, because I know as sure as I say it, black feminists be coming for me. Well, what about? I understand all that, but and really, to be perfectly honest with you, that ultimate answer pretty much kind of answers that. So if I were going to say a symbol, the most iconic symbol of second wave feminism is the feminism that most people tend to associate with Gloria Steinem, even though she was side to side with a black woman. And I talked about that black woman and everything. So let me see here. So the radical wing of second feminism, and that calls for a radical reordering of society to eliminate male supremacy. Together, liberal, social, and radical feminism are sometimes called the big three schools of feminist thought. So we're also talking about third wave. Since the 20th century, many newer reforms of feminism have emerged. Some forms of feminism have been criticized for taking into account only white, middle-class, college-educated, heterosexual, or cisgender perspectives. These criticisms have led to the creation of ethnically specific or multicultural forms of feminism, such as black feminism and intersectional feminism. So I'm not going to go into the history, because I already have done posts about the history of feminism, and I broke down, and I can't remember if that was last year or the year before, where I broke down did a thorough breakdown of the first, second, and third and fourth, because there actually are, depending on whose theory that you agree with, there actually have been 4 waves of feminism. And so if you want those, you can look at the stuff that I have posted, or you can Google search them, however you choose to do that. So movements and ideology. So there are many overlapping feminist movements and ideologies that have developed over the years. Feminism is often divided into 3 main traditions called liberal, radical, and socialist or Marxist feminism, also known as the Big Three schools of feminist thought. Since the late 20th century, newer forms of feminists have also emerged. Some branches of feminism track the political leanings of the larger society to a greater or lesser degree, or focus on specific topics such as the environment. So the liberal feminists, also known on other names as reformed, mainstream, or bourgeois. Um, or bourgeois arose from 19th century first wave feminism and was historically linked to 19th century liberalism and progressivism, while 19th century conservatives tended to oppose feminism as such. Liberal feminism seeks equality of men and women through political and legal reform. So, first wave feminism, I wouldn't say that there is a photo associated with it, but if you want to talk about first wave feminism, one of the big issues was women's suffrage. And as I have said, black women were even part of that. You know, people like to play it down. Oh, that was white women, but there were black women. Sigourney Truth, who I talked about earlier, would have been around at that time. Even Harriet Tubman had a hand in that particular type of feminism. I'm not gonna eat. So another thought is radical feminism. That's usually, if you see a cross with a fist at the top of it, those are usually the radical feminists, and they arose from the radical wing of second wave feminism, and called for a radical reordering of society to eliminate male supremacy. So there is this iconic footage. If you subscribe to the Dick Cavett account on YouTube, there are some of the white feminists did not play. Okay, so there is an interview where these ladies are sitting beside Hugh Hefner, and when I tell you they are reading him the riot act, they are not playing with him, and they let him know in not so many terms. No, sir, you're not a feminist. No, sir, you don't. You objectify women. You have to see it. I'm like, oh my. I had to get him a couple snaps. You had to get him a couple snaps. It's just something else to see. So when I also think about the women like those. Also, there are different, if you look at All in the Family, that's why I said some of these old sitcoms, even though they're fictional characters, I kind of like looking at them now at the age of 55, because I remember being very, very young and having a very limited understanding of the issues that they were talking about back at that time. Now that I'm older and I'm able to look at them with an adult understanding, it's like, man, you know, this was something that women were having to deal with. This was something, and the fact that we didn't even have laws that we could really sue. There was no legal precedence on us being able to sue to obtain the rights. Not even maternity leave. Maternity leave is something that we never, and we barely have the maternity leave that we could have. So it considers the male-controlled capitalist hierarchy as the defining feature of women's oppression and the total uprooting and reconstruction of society as necessary. Separatist feminism does not support heterosexual relationships. I'm like, sexist. Lesbian feminist is, yeah. So not all, let me say this, not all feminists are lesbian. And not all lesbians are feminists. So you have to be careful not to lump them in together. There's also black and post-colonial ideologies. So if you want to read more about this, because there are definitely many different schools of thought, but I want to talk a little bit more, and I'm going to break down, I may even make this a separate posting. So what has been feminism So different forms of feminism, different waves. We've had first, second, and third waves of feminism, and each wave has come at a time period where the fight had a different focus. We've come a long way. There used to be a Virginia Slims commercial that says, "You come a long way, baby." We've come a long way. We still have a long way to go, because we're still fighting different issues. Before it was about our ability to vote and have, and each one seems to be addressing our human rights. Our right to exist and not be treated like toys, and not be treated like disposable, and not be treated like playthings. I'm here to tell you now, if you get to see Bombshell, see it. Oh my God, it's an eye-opener. And this is recent activity. This is not something that happened in the 70s. This is not something that happened in the 60s. This is not behavior that happened before we had the legal right to sue and lawyer up and all this other stuff. This is stuff that happened, I would have to say, within the past decade or so. Like the behavior that these women that we're putting up with, is recent. This is recent behavior. So the social impact, and I'm going to do a separate podcast on feminist effects on society. But in a nut, the feminist movement has affected change in Western society, including women's suffrage, greater access to education, more equal payment to men, the right to initiate divorce proceedings, because there for a while we couldn't, the right of women to make individual decisions regarding pregnancy, access to contraceptives and abortion, and the right to own property, because at one point we couldn't. Okay. Civil rights. From the 60s on, the campaign for women's rights. From the 60s on, the campaign for women's rights was met with mixed results. In the U.S. and the UK, other countries of the EEC agreed to ensure that discriminatory laws would be phased out across the European community. Some feminist campaigning also helped reform attitudes to child sexual abuse. Yeah, the protections that kids have came through feminism. The view that young girls cause young men to have intercourse with them was replaced by that of men's responsibility for their own conduct, because of the men being adults. In the U.S., the National Organization for Women began in 1966 to seek women's equality, including through the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, which did not pass through some states and got enacted in their own. Reproductive rights in the U.S. centered on the court decision between Roe versus Wade, enunciating that a woman's right to choose whether or not to carry a pregnancy to term. Western women gained more reliable birth control, allowing family planning and centers, planning and careers, The movement started in the 1910s in the U.S. under Margaret Sanger, the lady who is associated with Planned Parenthood, and elsewhere under Marie Stopes. So Marie Stopes is a good figure to look up too, and I may look up both of them. In the final 3 decades of the 20th century, Western women knew a new freedom through birth control, which enabled women to plan their adult lives, often making way for both careers and family. The division of labor between households was affected by the increased entry of women into workplaces in the 20th century. Sociologist Arlie Russell Rothschild found that in two career couples, men and women on average spend about equal amount of time working, but women still spend more time on housework. Although Kathy Young responded by arguing, women may prevent equal participation by men in housework and parenting. Judith K. Brown writes, women are most likely to have a substantial contribution when subsistence activities have the following characteristic. The participant is not obligated to be far from home. The tasks are relatively monotonous and do not require rapt concentration, and the work is not dangerous. And can be performed in spite of interruption, is easily resumed or interrupted. In international law, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women is an international convention adopted by the United Nations General Assembly and is described as an international Bill of Rights for women. It came into force in those nations ratifying it. Okay. Jurisprudence, and that's feminist legal theory. I'm going to allow you to look that up. So I'm also, since I'm a born-again Christian, I am going to look up feminist theology. So I will be doing a thing on feminist theology. There's also the goddess movement, which I really don't subscribe to because it involves the practice of witchcraft. Christian feminism, which I'll be talking about this month. And since I'm not Islamic, I'm not going to mess with, but basically the ability, I will be doing a couple of posts on the ability to be feminist and also be a spiritual person. So this is my kickoff for March. So I am looking forward to hearing from everybody on these posts to let me know what you think about these particular topics. And so I look forward to hearing from you guys. Right now I'm taping this, but it should be up. It should be up on my Anchor podcast shortly after I get done recording this. It will be available on my Anchor podcast. And right now I have one more post or recording that I'm trying to get up on my video and everything, so that I can put it in the video and put it in YouTube. But both of them should be, everything that I'm recording this week should be ready to go up usually by this weekend. So you guys have a good one, and I will see you on the next podcast. I will be creating content all week long. So you guys have a good one. That's me blowing you a kiss, and I will see you this Friday morning. I will see you on the next podcast, and I will definitely see you live this Friday morning at 10 o'clock. So you guys have a good one. Hello, you have reached the message line for Adams Rib Media Ministry. If you would like to give me a shout out, recommend some topics for discussion, or give an opinion about some topics that I've already discussed, either here on my podcast or on my blogs, leave me a message and I will get right back to you. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.